Cheers.
Welcome to Ireland.
My first time to Ireland. It's
believe you've
crazy.
never been.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? I've been all the way around the world and first time here.
Why haven't you come?
Too much time with you, I think.
Such a lame excuse.
Yeah.
Because you're just the classic. If you're going to be a stereotype, I'm going to be a stereotype. You're the classic mainlander who thinks that there's no point in coming to Ireland until you get old and realise how pretty it is.
Well, hopefully this time here will put that to rights. But, geez, it's a long time since we did our trip now, isn't it? 5 years since the empty quarter.
I can't believe 5 years.
What have you been up to in 5 years?
Well, in 5 years, it's turned from going on these sorts of trips as kind of a cross between a jolly and a hopeful new way of life into a pretty bona fide career, which is quite a substantial change. Because when we went on the empty quarter, I couldn't even afford to do it.
You were so skint before that trip.
Do you remember I had to borrow £750 off you to go on the trip?
Have you paid me back?
You always ask me this.
And the answer is?
I paid you back in 3 instalments, and it took me 6 months to
Jesus.
save up each £250 amount.
Yeah, you were ridiculously broke then. How then have you gone about actually turning adventure into making a living?
I mean, I'm not sure. I haven't done anything different, but there's a lot to be said in a world like this just for earning your stripes and doing interesting things and doing them to a good level repeatedly. Not that many people, I think, stick at it for long enough. So part of it is just endurance. I'm interested in how has it changed for you being an adventurer since you started making a living from it to now?
Well, from when I started to when I started making a living from it, like you, was a big chunk of many years of being totally broke and just doing cool adventure stuff for the fun of it. And then there were quite a few years when I was just scrabbling like a lunatic, just doing any talk I could at village halls and primary schools and anyone who'd have me, and chasing any little bit of cash I could. I'm lucky though that a lot of the things I work really hard at are kind of fun stuff, like making films.
But does anyone pay you to make films?
They didn't do for many years. I spent years making films just because I loved doing it, and my early films are so terrible on YouTube, but I did it just because I loved it and did it for years. But the weird thing now though is that now, actually in the last couple of years, I now earn more of my money from film stuff than from speaking.
Do you feel like the nature of adventure has changed?
It seems to me that adventure's gone from being this niche little thing, which a few people have always done, to being a much more mainstream activity. And side by side with that, of course, the internet has made it so easy for people to share their stories. And that's completely changed not only how you tell your adventure tales, but also how many people are trying to do the stuff as well.
What are the negatives of that?
I think, well, it's easy to start out as an adventurer today. It's easier than ever. There's all the platforms for telling your stories. It's mainstream. It's a normal kind of thing to do. The downside of it is that it's a saturated market. It's much harder to do something original and to stand out. And then, at the risk of sounding like a real grumpy old man, there's a risk of forgetting about the adventure and just focusing instead on the fame and Instagram side of things.
That's true. I would say that for me, probably one of the most rewarding parts, if not the most rewarding part, is the act of sharing of it subsequently, of the kind of distillation process of everything you experience, turning that into something that someone's going to enjoy and hopefully learn from.
There's a huge amount of hard work of making some pretty little adventure look fun, but I really enjoy that side of it. And I think that's something that you're less keen on, isn't it? You like being out doing the stuff. You're less interested in all of the work.
No, I'm less interested in different parts of the work. I really enjoy the writing, I enjoy the research, I enjoy the documentation on the trip or in the field or whatever, but I don't have a particular interest in trying to grow a social media audience. I find that tiresome, and I find I have a lot of self-hate when I do that.
How do you feel then about this sort of living your life more in public?
I guess I have mixed feelings about it. I don't really feel like I'm living my life in public because I don't share that much of my private life. I feel like I'm moving away from just the pure adventure stuff very naturally because it doesn't interest me as much, because I don't want to push myself as hard, so there's not that much to show off about. And I'm more interested in very specific stories that speak for themselves, and I don't need to dress them up.
So, what sort of side of the adventure world online do you enjoy reading, and what do you not like?
The trip that I've been following for the last couple of years on is Paul Salopek, walking in the footsteps of humanity.
There's depth and substance.
There's
to that,
depth,
isn't
and
there?
there's so many layers to it, and each story that comes out, it could be a book or a trip in and of itself. I find the inspirational stuff, the very obviously inspirational stuff, doesn't appeal to me. It sort of seems like we're getting to a point where a trip isn't valid unless you're turning it into something that can inspire other people. In the same way that it used to be, unless you were raising money for a charity, a trip didn't matter. It shouldn't just be a tag on to try and give some worthiness to your holiday. And I think now it seems like people are going off and doing things, but they feel like they need to turn it into an inspirational message, when really they could as easily just either not post any pictures or just post a picture of themselves saying, I'm having a great time,
Yes.
and I'm unapologetic for it.
Yeah.
I would appreciate that much more, I think.
So 5 years since our first big desert trip, where will you or adventure be in 5 years?
I hope I won't be in another desert with you. That would show zero progress at all. What are you going to be doing?
5 years now, I hope I'm still writing books in my shed and making films out in the wilderness. So the last 5 have been pretty good.
You'll almost be retired by then.
Hopefully. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. You can go watch rugby now.